Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the People's Law School. This is our last class here for this year. I want you to know that I've had a good time doing it. I've been doing this about 25 years. I've been practicing a little over 40 years, and what I hope that we have done over the few decades is to let you know and let you see that we lawyers are just like everybody else. We're just as human. We're just as whatever, and to move some of the mystery out of the practice of law. And in that way, we will have a stronger community. A lot of people think that lawyers are either up here or they think they're down here, but they don't think of them as one of us. And my personal opinion is, since I was the first lawyer in my family, when I came along, there hadn't been a lawyer for 2 or 3 generations. I have observed, I used to look at lawyers on the outside, and now I have what I call the Richardson effect. Does anybody know the Richardson law firm? That's Dick Richardson, Jim Richardson, Pat Richardson. There's a million of them. There's about 5 generations of them going now. And I tell them, I tell my dear friend Jim, I said, the problem with you guys is y'all are not real. You don't know what real people think. You've been too isolated from the real world. And Jim just smiles. He actually thinks it's a compliment. And I actually mean for it as such, because I know that lawyers do think a little bit differently. A little while ago, y'all heard my old friend and classmate, Bobby Prince, talk. And I will tell you that Bobby he's for the last 25 years, he has been the person that has taught. Every trial lawyer at the University of Alabama has gone through and been taught by Bobby Prince himself. He has taught for all those years there in Tuscaloosa, and he is the one who has taught all the best trial lawyers that you see right now. Lawyers, famous lawyers include 24 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Lawyers include 2/3 of our presidents of the United States, including Bill Clinton, Abe Lincoln, Tom Jefferson, and Hillary Clinton, Castro, Gandhi. Saddam Hussein took his law degree by gunpoint. But law degrees are important, and I know that a few years ago people said, oh, well, I don't want him to be a legislator because he's a lawyer. And what I would say, since I have a law degree, is how can somebody go to Montgomery and pass the laws and enact the Code of Alabama if you had never read the law and you don't know the effect of it and you don't know what it means? How can you do it? But that's just because I'm a lawyer and I have my own opinions. A lot of my friends say, well, what does it take to be a lawyer, particularly a trial lawyer? And I tell them, you just must be brave. I don't know that you have to have a lot of sense. I know Bobby Prince and I were both sort of in the middle of the class, but you have to be brave. You've got to, the number one thing that I noticed when I got out of school and came back here to Huntsville, where there are a lot of people advocating positions, a lot of lawyers I knew in the neighborhood, and I would go into court and I would hear them say outlandish things on behalf of their client that I couldn't believe. I mean, I'd known this man since I was 13, 14 years old, and here he's standing up asserting something that I said, Mr. So-and-so, I just can't believe that you said something like that, because it is so irrational and it doesn't make sense. And what you don't realize is what you do on the second floor of the courthouse does go on back to the neighborhood, and people do talk about it. People like me, because I've lived here all my life, and I've gone back and said, I can't believe this guy, even though he was a lawyer, was advocating something. I call it the Saturday Night Live effect, where those comedians, they have this deadpan look where they say something so absurd. And I think, wasn't Saturday Night Live, didn't it sort of arise out of the Harvard Law School community? I think it did. But that deadpan look about they're saying something so seriously, and it's just so wrong and backwards and upside down, that's the Saturday Night Live effect. But I say, well, what's your best characteristic? I say, you just got to be brave. You just got to have courage. Now, when I got out of law school, I was just 24 years old, because I went straight through. I had a high number in the lottery, if anybody remembers that, during the Vietnam War, and I blew straight through, and I figured I could be brave. I didn't get drafted. I didn't even go down for a physical. And when I talk about people being brave and people in court being brave, I think of my tennis partner, a guy named Bill Leach, who was in the Air Cav in Vietnam. And he said, though the anti-aircraft fire, when it would come up at you, it would look like flaming basketballs. And I said, oh my God, you must have been scared to death. He says, I was. He said, but you just got to hold on to what you're doing. And I said, well, did they shoot a lot of them at you at the same time? He said, 1,200 rounds a minute. You think about that. Now, that's somebody who's really, really, really brave, and I would hope that that if I were in that situation, I would have been as brave as he is. He did tell me, I said, you sit on your helmet? He said, no, I sat on my pistol. He said that helmet was too big. But he was brave. Now, but Ms. Liphart, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
You have said some very interesting things. What is the most exciting, comforting, and issue that you have ever had in your past life of, let's see, 40 years? So I guess 39 years.
Well, are you saying that what was my most interesting case? Maybe it was my first one, because I was straight out of law school, and Judge Sturdivant, we were down at the city, and there were 13, they were actually soldiers that were at the King's Inn, and they were having some kind of big time party. It was men and women, and some of them may have even been in uniform, but they were just raising hell like who'd have thought it, and they were having the biggest time in the world. But there were 13 of them arrested for disturbing the peace, and they appointed so-and-so lawyers for this one, got down to 12, and then they ran out of lawyers, and I was a young clerk. I just went over to the city court to see to this court right here, to see what they were doing, and they said, Brinkley, you get that one. And I went, oh my God. So we're all sitting there. There's 26 of us sitting there in the courtroom, and the police are testifying as to what they saw each person do and how guilty or drunk they were. And when the judge at the end of the case looked at all of them and started finding whether they were guilty or not, what I noticed is that the first thing he did is he called my client first, and my client came around and he said, Mrs. Jones, he said, I find you not guilty. Next. And what I later figured out, I mean, these courts, these are run by real people, and what it is they figured out that, you know, she really didn't even need a lawyer much. She was charged, and somebody had to sit there with her, but that I think they knew she would win anyway. So that was my first case. And then I had a guy right here in the city court, and what happened is that the Mayor Davis, Joe Davis of the city of Huntsville, looked out from the ivory tower there at the gray building down at the city, and he looked down, and there was my client sitting there, standing there in the bottom of the ivory tower there, and he was TTing on the flowers. He was going to the bathroom in the garden of the city of Huntsville there when we had a garden. And so they came down there and they arrested him, and they did all these things, and took him to jail, and they appointed me to represent him. And so what I did is, being right away, I knew that I must go see my client and talk to him, and I'm there in my little wool suit. And the thing you've got to learn about why you never want to be in the jail is because it's hot. It's hot up here at the jail. They don't have air conditioning, and it smells like the nastiest restroom you've ever smelled in your life. And if that's the way you want to live 24/7 for the next 90 days or however long you get, so be it. The whole reason I'm not going to ever commit any crime and spend any time up there for any length of time is because it stinks. So I go up there in my little blue suit, and I'm standing there, and the first thing they do to young lawyers is the bars right here and the elevator doors right here, so they can lock you in, and they do it on purpose to the young lawyers. The jailers do. Everybody's in on it. But anyway, so the first thing you do is you get locked in this little area where the door of the elevator slams right here, and then the bars are right here, and you just can't move. But I go in and I say, hello, I need to see my client, Mr. Billy Joe. And I would like to talk to him. And the deputy looks at me, the jailer says, you want to see Billy Joe Bates? I said, well, yes, he's my client, and I need to talk to him about his rights and things. And he said, okay, you want to see Billy Joe? So be it. So I go back there, and we go back, and they have the bullpen, the room where everybody is, and the latrines are over there, and there's all these hardened criminals over here in one huddled in one corner, and there's Billy Joe, and he's sitting over there. And you notice this is, I mean, I'm not big on bathroom humor, but here's what happens, is that I'm sitting there, and Billy Joe has his arm around the steel or the enamel of the latrine, and he's sitting there, and he's got a dipper just like this, and he's going, and when he drinks it, it pours all over him, and then he walks up, and again, it's rather confining for the young lawyer. And as I said, I was about 25 at the time, and so I'm standing there, and the jailer just looks at me, and he said, would you enlist Mr. Bates like a private interview room? And I said, no, I think I can get it for here. So what I did is I went back immediately, and I went to the probate judge at the time, who was Myrtle Green, and I said, I need to issue a commitment for Billy Joe and put him in, and send him down to Bryce. And so what they did is, actually, it was one of my first court-appointed cases, and they commented, they said, oh, well, you're probably the first young lawyer like this who has said, rather than trying to get him off for the crime, you're going to go get him some help, which was, I committed him, I had somebody commit him, and he went down to Bryce, and I actually called Bryce, and I told them that I had Billy Joe here, and they went, ah, Billy Joe, how's he doing? And so we took him back. And so, Bonnie, there are so many cases, maybe my third one, and this is maybe my first three cases. There was a guy, and his name was Carl Wayne. Carl Wayne had been accused of stealing. Remember the Donovan's mall there that had a drugstore or something in it? And what he did is he went in there at the cash register, and the lady, they had told him, you know, that he had to stay in line and keep his hands off all of the merchandise because they suspected that he would be a thief. And he said, oh no, but he wanted some sunglasses. So Carl Wayne grabbed these sunglasses, and he put them on, and he walked like this, and he walked right past the cashier, and went outside so that they had to arrest him. And so I remember that in my interview with him, I said, well, tell me about your, I said, who are you and whatever. And he said, well, I'm Carl Wayne. I'm actually from Sylacauga, Alabama. And he said, I was a student out here at Alabama A&M University. And I said, well, what were you majoring in? He said, I was majoring in geology, anatomy, microbiology, and whatever. And he named off electrical engineering and electronics. And I said, well, what were you doing the day you were arrested? He said, well, I was temporarily employed at Magic Tunnel Car Wash. And I went, oh, Lord. And so that's who and that's why I say, so I was getting paid $10 an hour to represent him, as all the young lawyers were back then. And that's why I say, I know we had an earlier session a few weeks ago that they talk about all these young lawyers who don't protect the rights of the individuals. And I think that our state needs to quit picking on all these young starving lawyers who, I mean, they hadn't got a dime anyway. They've just been through law school, and took them 6 months to get over the bar. And often some of them have little children and whatnot. And those are the people that we're leaning on so bad to make sure that they don't get paid, because we think they are the worst people next to those drug-using welfare people, maybe are the young lawyers. So anyway, what's fair? I don't know. People have asked me, they say, well, should you go to law school? And what I say is, to a young student, anybody that's 19, 20 years old, is don't set your sights too low. The number one rule, do not set your sights too low. And the rule of parenting I heard was from my grandmother. Jimbo, you might remember, Mom, my grandmother said, I asked her, I said, what is the secret to raising children? And how do you raise good children? What's the secret? If you could say one thing, and I asked this to my grandmother, I was older at the time, and she said, children grow up to be what's expected of them. And I remember that from our grandmother, Jimbo, that she wasn't the kind that you really had a discussion with. She was basically ordering us around, and she was a rather stern person, and you didn't have such discussions with her. And so here I was about 40 years old, and when she told me that, I've always remembered it. Don't set your sights too low, and don't let your children think that you think that they're too dumb to go to law school or that kind of thing. But if you do, and if you get in there, remember you're going to have to run into real live lawyers like Bobby Prince and the others that you have met here during this. Yes, Mr. Hayes. And would you? How many have you known who are older who go back to law school? I think that there's a point of diminishing returns. The question is, how many people do I know that went to law school later in life and let's say maybe thought it was a good thing to do? I think there's a point of diminishing returns. I have been at it 40 years, and I still think that I need maybe a few more years under my belt to actually let the 3 years of sacrifice pay for itself. These student loans and things, and I didn't have any student loans when I got out because Melissa and I were married in law school, and so we were not knee-deep in debt, but there's so many of them who were. You know, Justice Clarence Thomas, who was on the Supreme Court of Alabama, the Supreme Court of the United States, he spoke to some school. He'd been on there about 3 years, and he said, you know, I didn't pay off my student loans until about 7 years before I got on the Supreme Court of the United States. And that's a heck of a comment. I forget how old. I know he was very young when he got on the Supreme Court of the United States. But I heard this. I was on an airplane, and Lynn Burbach said this. She said that Roy Clater, a well-known realtor here who just died, he always said, you always want to be, he said, the first son or the second wife or the third realtor. How about that? I think that's pretty good. Yes, Judy.
Can a member of the public go into any court and just sit and watch?
You can sit in any court and watch any trial. The only rule is that if the matters are so sensitive and of such a personal nature that a judge should exclude it, he can and will, but they seldom do. If you want to go in and watch cases like even the divorce cases that are tried to a judge and not a jury, even you can go in there and watch them and watch some man and wife fight it out.
Do you have to wait until they have a break, or can you just walk in while somebody's talking?
That's just a matter of courtesy. If you can sneak in real quiet and tiptoe in and not make a lot of noise, do it. If you can't, so be it. What you can do is go to the clerk's office on the 2nd floor or the 8th floor and go in and ask them, you got any murder cases? Usually they try the big murder cases on the 2nd floor because we have the big courtroom. And usually you can tell it because there are all kind of deputies and there's all kind of people hanging around the courtroom. And that's how you can tell if you're going to get in on a good case or not. A lot of these civil cases are just, it's like watching paint dry. And a lot of the lawyers don't, I mean, the trial lawyers may be 10% of the bar, but there are a lot of them that try cases who don't know how, and they just they bore you to tears because they don't know what they're doing, and they're wasting everybody's time. Yes.
Totally different subject.
Yes.
Product liability, in particular vehicle defect.
Yes.
How do you decide whether to wait for the manufacturer to offer you something, which might take 2 years in the case of Volkswagen diesel,
Mm-hmm.
or do you sign up with one of these lawyers that sends you the mass tort invitation?
Let me tell you, should you join a class action or not? And you've used the example of products liability. What I would tell you is that I would join with one of the the lawyers who advertise on TV and say, and there's a couple of national firms. Or if you're in Alabama, I would go find the Beasley firm. Jerry Beasley's law firm down in Montgomery is truly an amazing law firm. And we all remember when Jerry Beasley and Bill Baxley were our two leaders, and you would wonder which one was going to be the governor and which. Well, when Jerry Beasley saw his political career end, I think it surprised everybody to see that he became a plaintiff's lawyer. But Jerry was a smart guy and did a lot for the state and still is. Jerry Beasley's law firm is called the Beasley Allen firm in Montgomery, is the real deal. Call them. If there's any class action you want to join, call and see if they're doing it. And they will help you. I would not, you need to know that in Alabama you've only got 2 years to file a lawsuit for negligence, and that if you wait beyond 2 years, it's just too bad for you. Also, talking about products liability cases, people say, oh, well, he's suing the vehicle or suing the machine. That is simply not true. What it is you're suing the person who made the machine, who reasonably knew, if you were in his shoes, that in fact what he was doing is dangerous. Now, there are some products that are inherently dangerous, like poisons, acids, sharp objects, and things like that. And if you've got a product that you're making that you know, and this is a rule of engineering, safety engineering, if you've got a product that you know is dangerous under certain circumstances to, let's say, children or others, what is the answer and what do? You warn, and that's the answer. You warn. You tell them about it. Just like when you hear those trucks back up and you hear the beep, beep, beep all the time. You can't help it. A truck moving backwards is going to probably hit something. Yes?
You just mentioned a car wreck. What about dealing with an insurance company where they've got adjusters in another totally different part of the country that are totally unfamiliar with Huntsville, and they've had no experience? How do you get due just jurisprudence?
The question is, what do you do where you've got, let's say it's an all-state carrier, or they're responsible for whoever hit you or hurt your car, and they don't know Huntsville. Well, what we have found is that, you know, the laws of the United States of America, we're all really just one big old country, and it used to be like in medical malpractice cases, the plaintiff couldn't get a local doctor to testify against a local surgeon, let's say, who's being sued. And so someone would have to call in some expert from New York, and they'd say, well, he doesn't even know the law of Alabama. Well, what we do know is that all human beings are the same in America, you know, and that it's the same medicine, and it ought to be the same law, because, as we say, the law is merely the codification of reason. And it's merely a statement of what we've all learned through the ages of what is and is not true. And as I've said a million times, and then the question becomes, what is truth? You know, so, and what we lawyers say is when you determine the truth, it will be determined by the verdict, because verdict is Latin for truth. And so that's a circular way of saying, I don't know, it's just a whole big crazy business we're in. When you're in law school, they'll have a professor stand up and say, well, Mr. Brinkley, suppose we had this, and y'all saw the paper chase where the professor says, well, Mr. Brinkley, you've told me that this, well, what if this were the facts? What would you do? And then the young student, the law student is trembling, says, well, the law is this, or I would do this. And then he says, well, how about this? And how about this? And how about this? Well, a few years later, after I'd gotten out of law school, it dawned on me they will take you to the absurd every time. It's reduction absurdum or something is the phrase they use for that. But I finally, a few years ago, decided here's the answer to the question. The answer is, Professor, you have asked us to assume so many absurd facts, so that what we now have to do is begin back at the beginning. So, and you begin with the basic premise. And that's the answer to the question for the hard law school professor. I remember when I was in law school, I seem to be talking a lot about that today. But I remember when the professor would have me stand up and would grill me like that. And later I figured out that the reason, it's like reading a history book. Reading these law books are like reading history books. It's not brain surgery or anything. But what they're trying to do when they make it so hard on you, making so many books and laws and things, is they're trying to weed out those students who don't care, won't work, or will crack when they get under pressure. Because what you find as a lawyer is you do get under pressure a lot. I think Kerry Riley said the practice of law is merely a state of controlled panic. If I told y'all what all I'd done since 4 o'clock this morning, y'all would marvel and say, good grief, how does he do it? Well, I don't know either, but what I know is that there are a lot of lawyers and people in my class that didn't make it and couldn't make it, and I could have told you back then that they would have made the bad decisions when they were under pressure. We see that in every profession. What is the most stressful profession? I've told you all this before. It's not lawyer. It's not doctor. It's being a waitress. Being a waitress is the most stressful job. One study I read that says there is, because you have to put up with everybody's grief, and you're not in control of anything in your own situation, and all you're doing is jumping around to whatever the whims of other people are. I think that's a pretty interesting observation. I was a waiter once in my life, and I can appreciate that because, in fact, my son worked at Applebee's for a couple of years, and he said, my children are going to work in the food industry. And I said, why? And my son John, he said, because that way they can just see how terrible people can treat other people. And that was, I thought, pretty perceptive of my son at the time. That's what John said. He said how people treat other people. He said they treat the waiters and waitresses like they're furniture, like they're not even there, like they're not even human. And so, and I didn't do that but one night in my life, so I can't comment on it. Is there another question? Yes, sir.
Is this class going to continue?
This class,
Going to have another one?
if we can spark the interest in it, we will do it. If we don't, we won't. This was begun by the trial lawyers, and it was begun up here and in 3 other cities. And the reason it has succeeded up here is because we've had the following of a good group of intelligent people, that's you people, and then the trial lawyers have come from all over the state to be here. And I think it's because we've got such good professional help, like Thaddeus Brooks and his group here. We've got the cooperation of Judge Rodenhauser and Judge Linwood Smith, our federal judge, when we got kicked out of the courthouse. One time the county commission met, and they decided that we trial lawyers should not meet on Monday nights having the People's Law School. And I went to see Judge Little at the time. He was the chief judge, and he told me that. He said, Brinkley, we don't want y'all here anymore. They said they just think it's a bunch of you silly trial lawyers like Phil Price and Mark McDaniel and you, and y'all are just hustling, trying to market your own practices and hustling your own business. And I said, Judge, that's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, if any of the lawyers try to sell their own law practice, call me if you've got a lawsuit type thing that we see on TV. I said, that is struck. It's struck by the editors of the program. I said, we don't allow that for trial lawyers, and that's why we've done so well for 25 years. And then I said, and by the way, Judge Little, I said, if y'all can have 100 drug addicts next door every Tuesday night going through these rehab classes, you sure as hell have 100 nurses and doctors and engineers from Huntsville that want to learn the law and figure something out. I said, to do it, you're just wasting Freon. And so they kicked us out. And Actually, what I did, I said, wait a minute, the classes start next week. He said, well, we'll give you time. And I remember Judge Linwood Smith, our federal judge, when I told him, I said, well, we got kicked out. They don't want us anymore. They cited security reasons. And Judge Linwood Smith, he said, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. He said, why don't y'all use my federal courtroom down here? However, around that time, we had 9/11, and there were some security, real life security concerns. And so we came down here to the city of Huntsville, and this is, as you can see, this is a beautiful courtroom. Yes, Mr. Hayes.
This has been a fantastic session, and I heard his question two different ways. One is, will you be having this more during the year? And the other is, of course, are you going to continue it next year?
Well,
so this being the last one for this year, are you going to continue having additional sessions during this year as opposed to next year?
I will let you know in 6 months. The problem, the reason we only have it the one time in the spring of every year is because it is so much wear and tear on the lawyers, and it's quite an effort to produce this program. And we tried to have it a couple of times. I know the first 2 or 3 years that we had it, like in the spring and in the fall. And I said to somebody, I said, I can't take it anymore. I said, I feel like I'm working 2 jobs instead of 1. And so we just cut it down to one time, and that's what we do. And to answer your question, I don't know. I tell you, I will tell you that we do now have a website, so that instead of watching the TV programs on Comcast and in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and the other cities where we are, reaching 2 million people a year, you can now go to People's Law School, PLSALA for Alabama.net, and you can see every program. We're going to get, I believe Thaddeus said that he's got the 20 programs up for last year and going to get the 20 programs up for this year. So we'll have 40 programs on the website forever and whenever you want to see them. And so I hope that if somebody sees me on TV, it'll say like PLSALA.net. And if you ever want to see like Mike Wisner on taxes, or Connie Glass on elder law, or Andy Siegel or Brian Clark on criminal law, you can simply go to that website and call up one of those YouTube programs, and that'll be done.
And they might go viral.
Oh, really? Hey, I don't know that much about it, but Thaddeus does. And somebody asked me these questions prior to class, said, would you talk a little bit about automobile cases? And I said, yeah, there's just a few things you need to know. Number one, if you're going 1 mile over the speed limit, that's negligence per se. The speed limit's 40 miles an hour, and you say, I was doing 41, you're speeding, you lose. Second of all, that the mere fact that somebody didn't have a driver's license doesn't mean they automatically lose. The mere fact that doesn't mean that what they did was negligence. Also, if you've got coverage, uninsured motorist coverage of 20,000, 40,000, you need to up it when you go home tonight to 100,000, 300,000, so that if you get hit by a drunk driver or somebody, that you can collect money. If you get hit by a uninsured driver and you don't have any yourself, you have assumed that risk. The insurance companies have really made a big effect. We've all heard who's the big old black guy with played NFL football, who's got the deep voice, who says, "And you're in good hands with." I mean, we've heard so much of that, and we heard Peyton Manning say, the Nationwide is on your side. I have been in cases suing Nationwide, and they had a request prior to the jury trial to say, so that I couldn't say, they wanted to bar it in limine, that I couldn't say Nationwide is on your side. Because in my case, Nationwide was not on their side, and had just done terrible acts to screw their insured. And so, at the end to say, and so Nationwide, it would be a mimic situation.
Do you by chance have a list of good insurance companies?
I think there are some good insurance companies. It all depends on what it is you're trying to insure. Um, you've heard Bobby Prince talk about the Colossus computer program that Allstate uses and other insurance companies use, where you just feed everything into a computer and they spit it out how much money they think you ought to get, and then the adjusters have no authority beyond that to give you any money. That's a real factor. And what they do is the insurance companies, if you don't have a lawyer who knows a little bit something about what your case is worth, if they can settle your case under that, so be it, but they'll never settle it over that computerized number, period. That's the Colossus program. Talking about lawsuits, lawsuits have been discouraged so much. We've heard of jackpot justice, we've heard such, that in that jury trials, civil actions in Birmingham in the last 10 years have actually dropped about 30%. The number of filings have dropped. Also, if you remember, Governor Riley instituted a program wherein, let's say if you want to file a lawsuit in Alabama, you've got to pay $500 up front. If you demand a jury trial, $600 up front. And that discourages a lot of people from filing lawsuits. I have talked to you all before about frivolous lawsuits. There are so many rules about frivolous lawsuits. Lawyers never file them. You don't. People who say that are completely uninformed. What I find is worse than the more worse. Is that a word? Is that than frivolous lawsuits is frivolous defenses filed by lawyers. And here's another statistic, by the way, of the fatalities. What percent of people who get killed in car wrecks, what percent of people were not wearing their seatbelt? Sam says 70. The answer is 92%. I have thought about that from a psychological standpoint, and I have thought about it that maybe it wasn't necessarily the mechanics of the seatbelt that saved you, as opposed to the fact that a person who puts on their seatbelt is a safe driver. Think about that. Put on your seatbelt. I know for those of us my age that, it used to be nobody put on their seatbelt. And I remember one time I was having this wreck. I was flying, it was over on Sparkman Drive. I was a terrible driver, and I didn't have my seatbelt on. And remember, we had those bench seats. And my car was going around so fast because it was wet and we were going down a hill, is that I was holding onto the steering wheel like this, and my feet were actually touching the passenger's window. My feet were actually sort of hanging out the side there on the right. And I want you to know, thereafter, I actually did sort of wear a seatbelt, so I could hang on. And no, listen, my father, I know he had 4 teenage boys at one time, and he was just, it was a sad situation. I'd hate to have been his insurance company. Yeah. Oh, I remember. But in regard to the law, there's not a right for every wrong. People think that there is, but there isn't. In America, we try it as best we can to make sure that each person is justly compensated for some wrong that's done to them, but that's really not the case, and it really doesn't happen. What I have often thought after 40 years of watching our legal system, this institution, is that I think we just pretend to convince the masses that in fact there is a system of justice in place so that they don't riot and mutiny and so that there's not total anarchy. Because I know that with what we do down here, we're only tipping, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And we have criminals that get off even though they do things. We have corporations that do terrible things and they get off. It happens all the time. And then when we have these showcases or these cases that come along, sometimes I think we're just trying to make a point. and that's just to try to convince the rest of America that we really do have a good judicial system. I will tell you, we do have the best judicial system because we're patterned after England, and the English system is also in it is the jury system, which means that we have 12 people who choose or who answer the question in a particular case as to which side should win, and that's a big important right. The jury system came from the Scandinavians, by the way. It wasn't originally English, and it has been brought over here to America, and it is jealously guarded. Another thought I have, I'm just randomly throwing these things out at you, is that the bill of the amendments to the U.S. Constitution, I think, are the moniker, the name that they are just merely amendments to an important document, trivialize their importance. When we realize just how important it is that thou shalt have the right of free speech. Just think about how the people in let's say, the Muslim countries that don't have it, or the right of religion, or all of these fundamental rights, the right of assembly that we have, that we call them amendments. But the reason they're amendments is because at the end of the Constitutional Convention, or whatever it was, they said, these 10 things are so important that we're going to write them down and make sure. They said, oh, but everybody knows that you cannot be, there cannot be illegal searches and seizures. And they said, no, well, we're going to make sure we write it down. And so they called them amendments. But I think they should have called them like fundamental rights of every American citizen instead of amendments. And that would have been better. In regard to juries, the jury rooms are so sacred, and they're so. When the 12 jurors go back into a jury room, let's say, which are usually off to the side, I want you to know that at our courthouse we've got 6 circuit courtrooms, and that those jurors are, I would say, put on a pedestal. They are protected. They are either isolated or guarded so that their decision will be free from any type of bias or influence or corruption. People have asked me, in Huntsville, Alabama, is there any corruption in our judicial system? No, our judges are as honest as they can be, and I know every single one of them, and I'll stake my reputation on it now. They are all as honest, and people say, oh, and they are conservative, like that's a badge of honor. Yes, they are. They're all careful, they're educated, they're conservative, and lately, I will tell you what's happening. What I've noticed is they're all becoming women. When I was in law school, the 230 of us that got into law school, there were 175 of us that finished, and of those, 7 were women. Now, 52 to 55% of the law classes are women, and that is and that was okay, except when you get into let's say divorce trials, and all these women that used to complain when I used to hear about it 40 years ago. Yeah, but old Judge so-and-so, he's not going to be fair for me because I'm a woman, and he'll side with, or maybe he's a hunting buddy with my husband, and no way, and whatever. And now when I look around, and all the lawyers and the judge and everybody are women, and I'm representing the man, and it's just me and him against all these other folks, I now know what they're talking about. And it scares me to death because those women they're people like Sam Keith's daughter, Rebecca McKinney, who she herself was president of the Alabama Trial Lawyers behind Bobby Prince, by the way, just 2 or 3 years ago. His daughter was the president of the Trial Lawyers, and they are a bunch of smart folks, and don't think that Rebecca or any of the others are going to come up here and cry on your shoulder or do anything that would make you think that they're, for some reason, that they're not as good as a man. They scare me to death. I've already told y'all, yeah, Carrie Riley's one of those for real, too. She's for real. She's been a trial lawyer all her life. When you begin strong in a case, because people will be listening to you for the first 10 minutes, and at the end, they will listen to the last thing you have to say. And so you got to say something important. And there was this particular case where a person was personally injured in a case and lost both his arms, and I have told you this before, but in all the seminars and everything I've been to, and the best trial lawyer that I heard was Johnny Cochran talking about trying cases. You know, he tried a case one time in California. He said they decided to be more efficient, so they would have a morning shift and a late afternoon shift, 2 8-hour shifts for their courthouses. And so he tried, in 1 week, he tried a first-degree murder case, and he tried a car wreck case. And from 8 to 4, let's say, he would do the one case, and then from 4 to midnight, he would do the other case. And he won the car wreck case, and then the murder defendant was acquitted. So, but he always said, and we've all heard you must acquit if it doesn't fit. But he said, always have a theme and always have something that they can hang their hat on. And anyway, this case where the guy had his arms, and don't make it too long. This one lawyer was representing a man whose arms had been chopped off, let's say in a railroad accident. And the question is, do you argue long? What do you do? And he simply got to the jury and he said, because the other lawyer was in a wheelchair. The other lawyer who was defending the railroad was just showing all the things that a person can do even though you're disabled. And so the lawyer for the man with no arms said, you know, I ate breakfast with my client this morning. I know we've all been here for 2 weeks and whatever, but you know what I noticed about him? He eats like a dog. And then the lawyer sat down. In closing, I would like to read to you an address by Robert F. Kennedy to the young people of South Africa in 1966. Some people believe there is nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world's ills. Yet many of the world's greatest movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single person. A young monk began the Protestant Revolution. A young general extended an empire from Macedonia to the borders of the earth. A young woman reclaimed the territory of France. And it was a young Italian explorer who discovered the New World. And the 32-year-old Thomas Jefferson proclaimed, all men are created equal. These people moved the world, and so can we. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. It is from these numberless, diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a person stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression. Thank you. Welcome to the graduation of the People's Law School. We finished another exciting spring here in Huntsville, Alabama. We're here in the city court of the city of Huntsville, and the students here have now all received their certificates. And as you can see, we've got some people here, some of whom have been here before, like my friend Herb Hayes. Mr. Hayes, you look at me like, don't ask me anything, but what do you think, Herb? You always sit on the back row, but you always have intelligent questions. Have you enjoyed the program?
I like to work with Thaddeus in here, and I've learned a lot over the last 7 or 8 years of coming.
No, I learned a lot, and I had questions that I did ask, and I think my questions all got answered, and I think it's excellent.
Now, Kathy has the old Huntsville magazine. It's the magazine you see down at 5 Points, and when you buy it, you don't throw it away. It stays on your coffee table for a long, long time. But we have advertised for many years in her magazine because of that one reason, and we seem to get good results, by the way. What do you think, Judy?
I think this sessions have been very informative, and it's given me things to discuss with my family. And the one that made the most impression on me was the don't sign the arbitration clause when you go into the nursing home.
What was your best program? What do you think?
Well, I have to agree with the arbitration thing because I'm actually going through this with a family member,
Yes.
and I had no idea that we had the right not to sign it. So I was delighted to find that out
Excellent.
because definitely my family member is not competent.
There we go. Bonnie, how
I
about you?
really appreciated what Mike Wisner had said about taxes because I'm going through incredible things about figuring out how to work with my taxes now. So that's really it's my first year. I got a doctorate and I learned more in this year with People's Law School than I had learned getting my doctorate.
What do you think? Have you enjoyed the program?
Oh, I really enjoyed the program. I appreciate all Gwen's work and all the lawyers coming here. I've been able to talk to family members about the different topics that you've introduced me to. So, and much like them, I've learned a lot about the taxes and especially the nursing home. So I really appreciate all the hard work everyone's done.
Wonderful, wonderful. How about you, sir? What is your observation?
My observation is that it's a wonderful program, and if you could possibly export this to the local high schools.
And let me, along that line, talk to Mr. Jimmy Robinson right here, who spent 20 or 30 years teaching high school.
Well, this has been an excellent overview of the law in general. And recently, since I retired from teaching, I got on the state registry as a courtroom interpreter for Spanish. So this has been a great point of contact for me, as well as an overview about all the different aspects of law.
I've enjoyed all the lawyers that have came to talk to us. Just couldn't imagine that it would be so good.
I think it's excellent. I'm amazed that you can get the kind of people to come and speak to us that you have. And one significant thing that I never thought about is after a trailer truck accident, he pointed out that either the person's dead or on the way to the hospital, so there's only one side to represent them.
That happens more than you know, and it's just not just in truck cases. It's in all cases. There'll be some little old lady lying there on the side of the road, and they don't tell her version to the policeman. And I have this case going on, and right now I have two just like this, and they say, so the policeman wrote it up wrong. Well, let me tell you that the law is that the policeman's report is not admissible in the evidence, so the jury will never hear it. He came up last, and he's just merely recording, so the accident report is not admissible. Think about that. What do you think, sir?
I'd heard about the program years ago, and I'd always wanted to attend, and I just waited until I retired and decided to come to the course, and I've been pleasantly surprised.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And let's see.
I appreciate Alan and Gwen and Thaddeus and his team putting this on, and I know it takes a lot of work to get it going. I've had a good time. I've learned a lot of stuff. This is my second certificate that I've earned through here, and I look forward to taking these messages and these lessons to my students at Buckhorn High School. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Chelsea, we saved you for last because this is your first course. What do you think about the course?
I think this is an awesome course. I found out about it just last week, so I'm really excited that I came this week. I have to say this is an awesome group of people. They were kind enough to let me graduate with them with Gwen's name on my certificate. I feel like I have to say that because we're in a court of law, and I have to be truthful about that. But this is an awesome program, and I'm looking forward to it if you do it again.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of all of us at the People's Law School, we thank you, and we'll see you soon.